Hi, welcome to the Voice of Bold Business Radio. I am excited to be your host today, and we're talking about all kinds of heavy, loaded words. The title of this program is Ethics, Values, and Us. And as you heard from Eva earlier today, provided you watched our live promo about 2 hours ago, we added some other words: character, integrity, and what do we do with those? Where do we go with those? And what does it actually mean in the world that we live in today, right now, not only within our communities, not only within our nations, but also as a globe? Okay, see, this is already a really big topic. And I'm going to introduce you to Tracy Revell, whom you will hear from after our introduction. She works with women to embrace their feminine-centered creativity and emotional intelligence. She also works to balance the feminine with the masculine focus, the action, the excelling that women everywhere want in their lives, where they want more confidence, where they want a more powerful presence. Can you see already? You're going to want to hear from Tracy. Now, before we go to the open, 2 more things. The first is, watch the show. You're already here. Leave us a review. Second, this is a live stream. Use hashtag VBBRadio, and Eva and Scott are watching, and they are going to pipe in your questions as we're having our conversation today. So with that in mind, we will be right back.
Hi, Jess! Yay! Thank you. Yeah.
Tracy, we have been planning this for a while, and we are finally making it happen today. I am glad to have you here. And in fact, this is the first of 2 currently scheduled appearances we have with you. Yeah. And this will be exciting because everybody, as you get to know Tracy, you're going to understand why I enjoy talking with her, the reasons I seek her out for her learning, and even more importantly, she's just fun to hang out with, which is perfect for our show right here, Learning with Fun. Okay. And I want to start with a question. How do you live by your values, and how do you make ethical decisions?
How do I not live by my values? Might be a better question. A lot of my work is that we know what we know, and we just tend to not listen to it and disconnect ourselves from it. Living by my values is really just learning to listen to myself and honor knowing what I know. If I have an uncomfortableness around it, is that an uncomfortableness that is my fear of vulnerability or being hurt, or is it really just an uncomfortableness of I don't belong in this situation, etc.?
And does that filter into ethical decision-making?
Ethical decision-making, absolutely. Integrity, and say what you mean what you say, do what you say you're going to do. Say what you mean what you say is huge. One of the first things I do with all my clients is bring in the 4 agreements, which is actually ancient Mayan wisdom called the Nawal. Don Miguel Ruiz brought it into the book form of 4 agreements. One of the first things I do with my people is teach them to really, really live the 4 agreements. And if you're living the 4 agreements, you're living with integrity. When we start to get really good at dancing with all 4 of them, we can't help but live our values.
Let's go back to the uncomfortable piece. One of the things that I talk about a lot is flying with the uncomfortable. The fact that we can't know everything. We don't know everything. And when we think we do, the universe has a way of stepping in and going, ha ha, not so fast, right? And you had mentioned some ways that uncomfortable shows up. And I'd like to have you repeat some of those or whatever comes to mind now, because when we start with that, understanding what makes us uncomfortable, we can figure out what the first step is to moving toward that dance that you were speaking about.
Especially as women, we are hardwired to know what we know in our bodies, literally in our nervous system, which is literally our mind and our body. We're hardwired to get our intuition in our bodies, and we decode it by emotion. The practice is to start getting really clear with if it's knowing what you know and the uncomfortability is I really need to remove myself from this situation, or I need to change it a little bit, or there's something here for me and it's going to take me to the next level and it's terrifying me. When we really, really, really tap into knowing who we are, beginning to notice the underlying filters, the beliefs, all of that stuff, and how they're stopping us, we start to get really good at dancing with what our uncomfortability is. I was dating a man. I was always uncomfortable. Like there was always this like uncomfortability around me. Lots of story around his divorce, let's just put it that way. And he was not really clear. Part of me was always like, I was telling all my girlfriends, I was like, I don't know if he's okay. I wanted to tell myself he was okay. You know, life coach, consciousness coach, etc. And I always knew he wasn't okay. But I wanted to make sure if it was my fear of getting hurt or if he just really wasn't okay. And it turned out he really wasn't okay. It's like digging underneath everything else, what's true and what's here for me to learn or just know what I know.
This is perfect because the example you just gave was not only am I uncomfortable, I'm ignoring or I'm trying to figure out if I should ignore my sixth sense, right? That intuition that we all have, any age, anybody, which is how connected we are to it by our practice and our willingness to be open to it. And the rationalizations that we use to get what we want out of something. And is it the point when we start doing this rationalization, oh, I'm sure he's okay. Oh, I'm sure it's just me. Oh, I can totally give an explanation of all kinds for everything that comes up around this because I'm not ready to face what I need to face.
Or I need to learn something here.
Could it be both?
Yes.
Okay. And usually it is, huh?
Usually it is. When you said that, I was thinking that totally.
Usually it is. I don't want to face it because I really need to know it because this is how I up level. This is how I go to that place that is going to be next. And it's terrifying.
Totally.
How many times do you get terrified?
I get terrified a lot.
Yeah.
I have a situation in my life right now that, I'm pretty sure it's not I need to run. It's a holy shit situation. Oops, I said a bad word. Sorry.
You know what? I think we're all right there. Although Scott may have to figure out how to do a beep.
Because of my background and my childhood, my upbringing, and some of this stuff that's really deeply imprinted on me, I get terrified with building this business and income and going where I want to. You know, my next step is getting into companies and upping my level from entrepreneurs to the next level with that. It's like, oh my God, can I do this? Because there's still this old thing. And so I'm super aware of it and I'm able to keep moving forward, which is what I teach all the time. And I'm figuring out how I best need to shift it so it's not there anymore. Because I know it's what's terrifying me.
We may go down a rabbit hole, or you may just say I'm totally crazy. A lot of people can do self-reflection internally. And I have learned a long time ago that I have to look outside and then I have to walk into something and experience it to decide if I like it or not. And I could even think about it. What would it be like if I was in Tracy's shoes right now? Would I like that? Maybe I should try out that action. Maybe I should choose that behavior in a situation. Maybe I can do these different things to figure out if it would work for me, because I tend to look forward instead of backward. The positive of that is that there's always forward movement. The negative of that is that, you know how you get that same lesson over and over again until you actually learn it, until you can figure out how to look back and figure out why you can't look back at it. It's going to keep showing up in a different way, regardless of how much different stuff I try going forward. And so thinking about self-reflection is really hard for me because I'm like, really? You want me to be in my body? What? Really? You want me to do what? I have to analyze the way that I acted. Can't I just say it was good for the moment and decide if I liked the outcome or not and be good with it? Really? So we've got two things. You're talking about self-reflection and the work that you're doing. And the more you practice, what I hear you saying is, oh, well, people who are out there who are at my level, maybe even somewhere on a different total path, it's an awareness and an active practice. And when we have that active practice, we're able to go, yeah, I actually am terrified all the time. Or more often than I thought I was.
Let's circle back around to the 4 agreements because they actually really super help with getting really clear and self-reflection. Speak with impeccability. It's pretty basic NLP stuff. When we start to rewire our languaging internally, saying it differently externally shifts everything, and vice versa. Again, it's nervous system stuff, brain stuff. So say what you mean what you say. And then number 2 is don't take it personally. Yes, it's about that person. It's not necessarily, well, it's not about me, it's about you. It's about, okay, that's not about me. And if there is something here for me to learn, what is it? That's the hugest one, because there's a lot out there in the personal growth speak, which is what I tell my peeps, what's underneath the personal growth speak for you. There's a lot out there about that's their stuff. And it's more defensive and protection rather than that's not about me.
There are a lot of people out there that have their values written down like me. And there are a lot of people who don't, like past me. And I mean, it took me a lot of years to actually write them down and go, I'm going to see if I can live these every day. I'm going to see how this shows up in my life every day to find out if what I say I value actually matches the values I'm living. Turned out, yeah, I was spot on when I actually did it. These first 2 agreements, if we tie these back to personal values, what would you suggest people do to find out, are they living in integrity and to their values?
Again, say what you mean what you say. If we're really being truthful, isn't that living by our values?
Assuming truthful is a definition of, or actually one of, your values. That's a big assumption there. So I'm going to point that one out. Like, well, yes, truth is one of my values, actually. Honesty is one of my family values, and they can be mutually exclusive. They can define each other. And so they play very nicely together when I show up as wife, mother, life partner, household partner, and then I can take my truth and I can bring it to Red Direction and show up with my team and say, this is how I show my truth. This is the way I'm inviting you to do that, because within Red Direction, here are Red Direction values, and you are here because you have something to give and you're going to challenge me and I'm going to challenge you. So we've got some accountability built into that when you have a business and the business owner like me has different values than the actual business. And that's something that I really feel strongly about, because when I'm thinking about ethics and I'm thinking about personal values, what I come across in small companies, business owners, their personal values are the company values, and they have 10 and 15 and 20 employees. And then there's always strife, because not everybody lives the values the same way the owner does. Not everybody defines the values the same way the owner does. And so we have to create a space of, I've got myself here, my integrity, my personal values here, and I'm showing up to hold a bigger space so that everybody else can come join my party at my business as the business owner.
If one of their values is, I'm just going to get ahead no matter what, then I guess speaking with impeccability isn't really...
Right. And so we have to be careful. Isn't that interesting? And that's the other thing I've found, Tracy, is that how can we evaluate ourselves to know we're doing, saying, being, the speak that we choose, that the speak and actions match, right? What we say and what we do actually match. And if they don't, we're going to see it in the responses. Maybe that's the question. What are the responses we're going to get when we are out of integrity with our actions and our values?
2 things. Are you coming from a really clear space within yourself when you're speaking your voice? Or are you putting it outside of you onto them?
So therein lies the first step.
So I have this phrase that I use, power of 2. There's always a transmitter, there's always a receiver in communication. Okay, the clarity of both affects the power of 3, the relationship and the communication. If you're really clear and keeping it within yourself with, this is my value, this is what I want, this is what I see, what I feel, instead of like trying to control or convince what's outside of us, because people will react to that. They'll get pissed at that. I'm cussing all over your show. Nobody wants to be told what to do. Feminine leadership is being able to suggest and hold space and direct without controlling. It's just that emotional intelligence into intellectual intelligence, circling back around to the intuition and the uncomfortability, and coming from emotional intelligence, I know what I know, and it's mine. It's not necessarily somebody else's, but taking it into intellectual intelligence, logic, action, thought, focus, direction.
Ladies and gentlemen listening to this show, we can have really clear intention and not really understand the words and get the right outcome of both of us understanding what's happening when we don't think we know what's happening.
That was power of two, power of three.
Yes, it was. Yes.
Cool.
It was. Okay, Ken from our audience has a question. He asks, how do you see the connection between ethics and values and then empathy?
Do I need to answer that? Because I don't see how they're disconnected.
Can you say why they are connected then?
If we are living ethically, with integrity, with what we value in ourselves, how we're showing up in the world, we're going to be, in my humble opinion, tuned into how we need to connect with the other person for whatever reason. So empathy in my work is not let me lose myself into that other person. We have been taught in our culture to not listen to ourselves, not honor ourselves, and lose ourselves into other people, situations, things. There are also people who are wired to be more sensitive than other people, and those people tend to lose themselves into other people more easily. So they create walls to shut it down because they don't know how not to lose themselves. When we learn to listen to ourselves, live from that internal integrity, we're going to honor the other person in a much cleaner space.
One of the things that you said early on, Tracy, was about emotion, and that there's emotion is a very big part of this. And regardless of our gender, we have emotion. And also, regardless of our gender, we may have a very small range of emotion. We may have an extended range of emotion, kind of like motion. I might be able to touch my toes. I might only be able to touch my knees if we bend over. Our range of motion, emotion. How many words can we use to describe how we're feeling, what we're perceiving, and how others are feeling? So it's an inside, it's a situation, and it's an outside piece. And the words that you're using and the descriptions that you're giving and the insight that you are sharing, we have to come from a bigger range of emotion to embrace that. What if our range of emotions is like 4 or 8 words, right? Happy, sad, glad, mad, the very basics. What could we do? And somebody listening is going to go, and by the way, if you're listening and you're like, I really don't know what you're talking about, this part is for you. Not to say that you don't have a lot of emotions, but the way that we get to describe our emotions is very limited. And I'm talking from personal experience. I've done tons of work to expand my range of emotions that I can feel, have the nuances between, and it drives people around me crazy sometimes because I'm very specific. I'm like, what? So the first step, if we only have a few, or we're not really connecting with this, I'm going to make an assumption and a guess, an educated guess, that the range of emotions, the number of emotions that we feel in a day is very small, 4 or 8. And the people who are connecting with this are going to have, 12 plus emotions that they can articulate and say that they have felt in a day. And so if we're only in that 4 to 8 range, those of us who are like, we're not really connecting with this, do you have an exercise or an idea or something that we could do to start working on expanding our range of emotion? Because, and as you're thinking, I'm going to go because this ties back to our values and ethics, because until we understand and can actually know what we are feeling, we can't really understand what somebody else is feeling. And so how can we do what's right by ourselves without harm to others unless we have that range of emotion?
I have a client who can't sleep, is freaked out all the time. Her nervous system is completely overloaded. For her, she had a horrible childhood. I mean, like crazy childhood. She came in one day and we got to some belief, like she just got divorced and she's pinning a lot of her pain on the divorce. It's underneath. It's not I got screwed by my husband and his mother. We cleared that and we got underneath to fear of not being safe in her childhood and her dad leaving and her mother. And underneath that, she had some pain in her upper back. And we got to that she was feeling stabbed in the back. Like she was not safe or secure within all kinds of situations. So it showed up in her marriage.
Yeah, because it was the current situation. Yep.
Right. It was angry at and resentful to husband, mother, underneath that fear. And then underneath that total, I'm not safe in any way. I'm going to get betrayed.
When we can unpack our own feelings and emotions and get to the situations that originally caused that, what I hear you saying is we can actually better understand what friction is happening in our own life. And so if we're faced with a dilemma, is this right or not? And when I take this action, I might hurt somebody's feelings, but it's in line with my values and my personal ethics. If I haven't unpacked all that stuff, and I don't have that foundation, it's much harder to make a decision and be solid in that decision and recognize, yes, I am acting with my own integrity.
Right. So I have another piece that I work with people. It's called The Invitation, and it's by a woman named Araya Mountain Dreamer. And there's a line in there that says, can you be faithless and therefore trustworthy and not betray your own soul? So when you're in line with knowing what you know and acting from that place, doesn't mean you're going back to empathy, decimate somebody else. You simply stay with yourself and go, this is my values. This is what is true for me. Staying centered in that, you don't have to make anybody wrong.
Exactly. And if it feels wrong, there's still personal work to be done. It may feel like we're wronging somebody, but in reality, we're making these decisions on our own.
It's another thing that I work with peeps. It's like in our culture, we are all taught that we have to take care of everybody else and nobody actually takes care of themselves.
Yes, I want to put a pin in that. We have another question and we're going to take a quick station break. You are listening to the voice of Bold Business Radio. This is program 129, Ethics, Values, and Us. And we are spending a lot of time on emotions because there's an element of looking inward required to be able to look outward and to better understand a situation and know how to ask questions and know how to proceed when things might be a little iffy comes from really knowing ourselves. And that's what I've taken away from you so far, Tracy. So Iris has a question. Iris's question, coming from HR, how can we interview people to uncover their ethical standards?
Everything about us shows up in our bodies. Once we get really good at getting clear and centered within ourselves, we can read what's going on within other people without putting our stuff all over them, and like watching how they're holding their posture, how they're shifting their body, how they're hiding, how they're showing up.
So there's a big element of nonverbal communication that plays a part.
Something about, it's an NLP stat, 57% of communication is body.
Neuro-linguistic programming, NLP.
Yeah.
So it's like around 90. When you add all the nonverbal pieces there's 2 or 3 other ones, I think it's around 90% is what we don't say. Maybe it's even higher than that. We'll get some exact stats.
And then there's tone, and then there's actual words or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, so what about the language? So if I'm trying to think, what would be an example of language? I tend to be optimistic, and I already told you, and everybody that listens to this show knows that I'm a forward thinker, and I always think in the future, and I'm holding this great big space of possibility. And that shows up in the language I use. You won't hear me going, have to do this. Every once in a while I do, and I catch myself because that's not a very optimistic thing. It's also kind of controlling. And possibility comes from letting go of control. A lot of things come from letting go of control. Maybe that's where we could spend a minute. How do we know when we're controlling ourselves from actually feeling ourselves or others? Because that's just what we do.
In actuality, we cannot control anything outside of us. We can only control ourselves and knowing what we know.
But it doesn't stop us from trying. Think about the parent you see in the grocery store who's having a because I said so conversation. Or think of the parent that is actually negotiating with their 2-year-old trying to get somewhere. That's kind of a control. It shows up in our workplace too, because if we say, I'm going to just kind of call out an elephant that I see on a regular basis. Somebody with authority will say, well, this is the way it's going to be done. And invariably, there's a curious person whose only interest is to figure out how can they do their job best and do it right with the information given. So they say, why? And the person who said, we're just doing it this way, gets flustered by that.
Because they ask?
Because the question is asked. And I will tell you what, I have very bad reactions when somebody asks me why. I would much rather have a who, what, when, where question to get to where I'm going. And if I get a why question, I will actually rephrase it to, can I answer it like this? Would it work for you if I said the question like this? Because for me personally, why is a trigger word. It causes craziness in everyday things. If you're asking me why I put the thing on the shelf right there, I am not going to have a good reaction. However, if you ask me why I'm doing what I'm doing today to get to where I want to be in 5 years, I have a very different reaction.
Interesting.
Isn't that funny? So you're learning more about me, but I guess where I was going with this is this, you're right. We can only control ourselves, and people tell us that, and we may hear that. We may even embrace that a little bit in ourselves. Yet, if we come from a place where we're supposed to control, or we think everybody thinks we're supposed to have all the answers and must be in control, we actually start carrying ourselves. The words that we use, the language that we have reflects that.
Totally.
And it becomes somewhat of a mask. So I guess that's where I was going with that. You know, how do we know we're controlling? If that's something we are prone to do, how can we start finding that in ourselves, right? Building that self-awareness.
If somebody asks us why, and we aren't really clear within ourselves, it's going to throw a monkey wrench into our psyches, if you will, into our nervous system. Once again, it just goes back to that. What are you clear about with your values, how you're living, who you are, how you're showing up, that clarity within self. So I have a client who, and I talk about her all the time because she's rocking her life. She's a SWAT cop in Texas, very empathetic, literally diagnosed with dissociative disorder because she picked up so much outside of her and had some stuff happen, yada, yada. So she literally was disconnected from her body when we started together. And now she's in this place of like, oh my God, she's gotten really centered in herself, that nothing outside of her is about her. And she's a SWAT cop. Okay. Mm-hmm. You have to understand the world she lives in. She talks people off of roofs every day. Okay. Yeah. And she's gotten to this place of where she's like, oh my God, I think about something and it shows up. It's amazing. She's gotten so clear in, like when we started, quote unquote, she's like, how do I shut up the mean girl in my head? And is the mean girl right? So she's circled back around to the mean girl's not right. I do know what I'm talking about. She wants to go into educating police officers on how to deal best with the mentally ill. And she had this fear that everybody's going to look at her and go, well, who are you? And what do you know? And she's really embodied, I do know what I'm talking about. She's getting job offers from this place and she's getting possible promotion here. And she's learned how not to control everything outside of herself, but to control herself and to let go of what is outside of her. Okay. So I got this quote from her last night and it's all over my Facebook right now. It's like suddenly having a key to a door that you've beaten on for years, even given up on ever opening. Then suddenly the key appears and it's in your hand.
How does that tie back to her ethics?
She very much wants to show up and be the best her that she can be while she is helping the mentally ill, the other police officers, the people she's arresting. I mean, she wants to really be the best her that she can be in relationship to everybody around her. She has to get clear on what the best her is first.
Once she is clear in her, when faced with an ethical dilemma, somebody tells me a secret that goes against my morals, that goes against my personal ethics, how do I respond?
It's not about you. It's their life, right? You can't control what they're doing. All you can control is you.
Even though it's not about you, couldn't it actually affect the relationship? Because if it's values here and it's how you've decided what's right and what's wrong for you, I mean, it could change that sharing of the secret or that tough conversation or that heart to heart that occurred actually could end a relationship.
Sure. My values, my ethics, how I'm showing up in the world, that's their life, but it doesn't mean I want it in my life. And that's okay. I can't control and change them. All I can control is me and what I want in myself in my life. What's my values?
There are whole classes and courses that people can take about ethics, which is why I wanted to bring that in, because I agree with you from the center point here. And then you were talking about 1-on-1 and the power of 2, and then the power of the third piece that comes in between. It adds complexity every time. And it's refreshing to hear a single word. It's not about you. Or it's a single phrase. Okay, Charlotte has asked a question. At what point does one remove themselves from a situation where there is a clear mismatch of values? More specifically, what internal signs have you noticed that one should pay attention to?
If it's something that this person is engaging in that you just really feel like harms the world. I know I have a friend who is married and has a side piece, as she calls it, and she's okay with it, and her husband doesn't know about it. And to me, that's not okay, but it's not about me. So I don't need to end my relationship with her. It's just like, know that that's not about me. That's her choice and how she's showing up in her life. If there was somebody that was out there killing people, to me, that's like a larger, usually with pretty much everybody, not okay value in ethics. We all agree that killing other people is generally not okay in our culture. I wouldn't want that in my space at all.
You're actually describing your ethical universe and how you use your values to navigate those situations. So yes, I'm going to add to Charlotte's question here. What if I'm at work? And what if the way the people around me, and I'm somewhere in the middle. I'm totally making this, this situation is made up. I'm in middle management somewhere. There are people below me and there are people above me. And I recognize that there's a disconnect somewhere. I'm not being valued. I'm not being heard. That could be one part of it. Another piece could be what people are saying and what they are doing is always so different that I'm not sure what's actually going on. And I don't know how to apply my values here. In either of those scenarios, values are a case. And is that a good place to stay? Maybe are there internal signs that are saying, yeah, okay, we're going back to the things at the beginning. I might need to leave. I might need to change something, or I'm terrified because it's going to take me to the next level. So in that case, typically more one of the first two in a work scenario, right? We have a miscommunication, and whatever we've been doing hasn't been able to resolve the miscommunication. This is a point where values come into play. Do I stay? Do I not stay? Can I put up with it? And provided I choose to put up with it, am I going to be diminished? How do I find the answers to those questions in the context of our conversation today?
It all goes back to that really connecting to the self-reflection place. Can I know that it's not about me? And if it is touching a very uncomfortable place in me, is it because I am somehow externalizing myself in judging for whatever reason? Or if it's something that is so out of alignment with my values and my ethics, I can't be around it if it somehow makes it okay. It's always all about the question. It's like, what's truly here? So I have another client who works for a company that's a really hardcore job. And in the last few years, management has changed. Her direct manager has no emotional intelligence at all whatsoever. And the higher up manager is like 500 times worse, right? So she's constantly in this feeling beaten down place because she was internalizing it and taking it on. So we've gotten her to the place of knowing it's not about her and really knowing it's not about her, that she still needs to show up and do her job for herself, to take care of herself while we work on her creating her own business and or getting another job.
I'm a mother. Everybody listening to the show knows I'm a mom. And I care very much for keeping the things that I was taught that I love and letting go of the things that I was taught by my parents that don't really resonate with me. And then what do I do when I find the things that I don't really like? I'm actually doing them. And so I've come up with a mantra to address one of those. And this is a mantra that ties into our family values. It is something I can live by, not only personally, but as a role model in my family. And then, of course, my role model in my work. And then, of course, taking it out to my community. And it is simply this: I will make choices that are kind and compassionate to myself and others. And kind and compassionate does not mean happy and appeasing. Kind and compassionate means I'm going to take care of myself. And once I'm solid and I understand what I don't understand, don't know, maybe I don't need to know about a situation, how do I show up with kindness for myself? Am I having a reaction? I'm going to give myself grace. Am I responding? I'm going to give myself grace and say, yeah, I am. And am I responding in a compassionate way? And then being able to speak from that place of, let's meet here. That mantra is something that I live in. It actually embodies our family values and my personal values and Red Directions values all the way around. Do right by yourself, and then do right by others. So do no harm, and do it in a way that is kind and compassionate every single time. And if it's not right, how do I feel it? I'm thinking about this. If I'm thinking about Charlo's question, how do I feel it in my body when it's not right? For me, it's the ugly pit in your stomach. I have lots of pits in my stomach. That one happens to be the ugly one. It's hard. It's like you might want to throw up. Like if I have butterflies, that's a different kind of uncertainty, and it's a little bit more all over. Even though it might be start on my stomach, my whole body will move a little bit. So it's recognizing, going back to the feelings, how do the feelings show up in my body that you were talking about earlier? How do we embody those? And then can we use those signs to guide us when we're faced with a situation that we think goes against our ethics, or that might be, we want to bring alignment to the values that we have with the situation that we're in, for example. What would you add to that?
Kind and compassionate also honors that what's right for somebody else, their values,
yes,
isn't going to necessarily be right for me.
Yes. Yes.
I mean, that's the bottom line. It's like, that's not about me.
Mm-hmm.
If that's okay with them, why do I need to judge them and make them wrong?
Yes.
Right?
That's right.
So again, going back to agreement number 2, don't take it personally. And if it is about me, what's here for me to learn? Mm-hmm. It's like, that's your stuff. How do I feel about it, my life, and operating from that space? Most people, except for my clients, know how to actually show up in this world taking care of themselves without making everybody else wrong. That's bold. It's like we're taught that everybody is supposed to take care of everybody else and nobody is supposed to take care of themselves. We are taught that. We show up taking care of ourselves and being like, I am who I am. Be bold for yourself. People have all kinds of reactions to that. It makes a lot of our old programming wrong. So it's bold to show up and be completely different. It's bold to own what's okay with ourselves instead of putting stuff all over everybody else all the time. It's bold to stay centered and grounded and calm in situations. It's scarcity is taught in our culture to be afraid, to blame, to be a victim. It's taught. And if we're not living by that, we are very often made wrong. So to be bold for yourself and learn to live from I know what I know, it's going to rock some worlds around us. That's bold.
You heard it here. You heard it straight from Tracy. This is the Voice of Bold Business Radio. You're going to find all the program notes from today's live show at thevoiceofboldbusiness.com/p129. That's thevoiceofboldbusiness.com/p for program 129. You can also search for Tracy Revell, and you can also search for Ethics, Values, and Us. Originally, we were planning on having 2 panelists. Life happens, we have Tracy. This turned out to be an amazing show, just the 2 of us, and I appreciate the questions from the audience. You're listening, you're watching, you're sharing. Rate us. Tell us what you want to see. We are on iTunes. Rate us on Facebook. Go to the YouTube channel and subscribe. We want this because the more other people find value in this program, and when you do find value in this program, share it with those that you know so that we can spread this word. We can reach the people who want this personal development, leadership development, and really what's underneath, what it means to be a leader today, because it's through our experiences that we are defining that. So, what that leaves us with is this concept of how do you live by your values and make ethical decisions.
Subscribe at thevoiceofboldbusiness.com and get more information, program notes, and past episodes. Bold leaders approach each situation and focus on action to achieve a higher level of leadership. Jessica Dewell, your business advocate, is the host of the Voice of Bold Business Radio. Thank you for joining us.